Gary Lee Barnes. My parents' names were Joseph Lloyd Barnes and Golda Irene Moore Barnes. She was raised up around Lincoln. 7 brothers and sisters, Willie, J.L., Juan, Sam, Doyle, Tricia, and Carol. And I got married in 1957 to Marie Langford. And we had 2 boys, Jim and Brian, and a girl named Tracy. And we moved over to the Weddington area in 1967. We divorced in 78. I remarried in 1980 to Donna Mae Buckley. Born in Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1938. My dad and mother got married at 35. My older brother, J.L., was born November 36, shortly after they sold Grandpa's old place and moved to Tulsa, where Grandpa and Grandma and his brothers and sisters lived. I guess they received a little down payment on the place, so he invested in some stock in a grocery store with his sister in Redford, West Tulsa, which is just close by to a little community called Garden City, where I was born. And they were in the grocery business until the WPA shut down and nobody had the money to pay them, so they went belly up, I guess, in the grocery business. But he worked for an old gardener there in the Arkansas River bottoms, and, raising vegetables and delivering them throughout Tulsa to the different grocery stores until 1939. Grandma passed away. They brought her back to Cincinnati and buried her in just a short while. Dad and Mom loaded up in an old T-model truck. And Grandpa come with them and they to help them, and they come to Cincinnati and moved in a house that May and Nora Brown lived in up on the hillside there on the west side of Cincinnati until they could get possession of the place. The people that had bought the place, due to the Depression, wasn't able to pay for it, so when they got possession, Dad traded the old truck. Of course, they'd taken Grandpa home in the meantime, but Dad traded the old truck for 3 heifers, and he'd saved a little money, so he probably bought a cow or 2. But anyway, moved back up where Keith Bear lives on Grandpa's old place. And that was when I was 6 months old when they come back here. And Willeen had just got started back to school at Cincinnati and come home with the measles, so Jake and me and our mother all wound up with the measles. And Mom liked to die taking care of us kids, so there was some people named Hayden and Clara Dees that had a store there in Cincinnati. And Mom couldn't say enough good about them because she come and made Mom go to bed, and she took care of us. But anyway, we got moved up in the holler there, and then of course we didn't have no way of going except walking. But Bob said gas and tires were rationed. Most people couldn't afford to drive anyway. But it's like a little over a quarter of a mile from the old place up there down to the highway. And they got into milking cows. Well, Dad had a wheelbarrow affair that he hauled the milk out to the highway each morning as he went to his carpenter jobs. But the road at that time up there followed the branch north of Miss Annie Mae's old place, which is where Earl Lawrence and his family lived last. The road was just an old wagon road, and crossed the branch 3 or 4 times up to Tom Phelan's old place, and then went to the left up to the top of the hill where George Mackey lived, and on down and went on through and come out over where John Randolph lives now. But most cars, wouldn't make it. It was a pretty rough old road. But Pete Jones lived where John Randolph lives, and Dad needed feed that he couldn't raise himself. Well, Pete would bring it to him. But shortly after we moved back up there, Juan was born there. So Jake and Juan were both born there in that house where Keith lives. But and Grandpa passed away in '43, and Dad and his siblings sold the old place, and he started the process to buy the place that we all called the George Griffin place down on the creek east of Miss Annie Mae's place. But we had to, he sold the place to Henry Riley, and he had to give possession, so we moved into the old Methodist parsonage, which was just the next house south of Joe Mackey's garage and shop. We lived there for a few months, and that's where we lived when I started school. And in time, well, Dad sold the place. He built a new house, a chicken house, and a milk barn, and put sheds on the hay barn. And in time, when he sold that, we moved a mile and a half east of Cincinnati, the Passley place. And the creek had, the 40s there was real wet, and the rain was become a big rainstorm, and the creek had forced the fences out, and the banks were caving off, and it was coming across its only real good field. So he sold out and didn't want to live on no creek anymore, and so we went up there where we had to draw all the water out of a 70-foot well. But kind of bad worse, but Cincinnati School, it was built by the WPA in 1938, and it was 4 rooms and a big auditorium with a stage and dressing rooms. And eventually they put a little kitchen in one of the dressing rooms, and then shortly after that they petitioned off part of it and put the kitchen over on the north end and put bathrooms in where the dressing rooms had been. 43, I started in the primer, they called it then. 4 rooms. It was, when I first started, there was the primer and the first and second and third and fourth, I believe, in one room. May have been just first primer, first, second, and third probably. And Lucille Pearson was my teacher in the primer, and then Miss Susie Robinson was the old doctor's wife. She taught us in first, second grade, and then Mary Clark taught us a year, and Cora Martin taught for a year or two. And the first day of school, I remember I met Bill Smith coming up onto the highway as I was walking to school, so we walked to school together. Our first day of school, my first 8 grades, or 9, I guess you'd call it, since the primer. But then we went to Siloam to high school. And then when we graduated in '57, we rode together the night we graduated. But, been a lifelong friend. Every Saturday night, everybody in the neighborhood that could was at the store on Saturday night. And the women gathered up in the store building, and the men in the feed room had an old stove back there. And of course us kids was all out, in the weeds, playing with each other and having a big time out in the empty lots and stuff. I remember there was kind of a stink at one time because some of the teenagers Clint Davis had fixed up an old truck for a school bus, had a tarp over the back of it. Some of the teenagers was playing in that school bus, and somebody happened to see them. They didn't think that was good for boys and girls to be playing in, in the old truck out there, so that put a stop to that. But everybody looked forward to going to the store on Saturday night. And we played on the creek. At that time, the highway was gravel and just pretty well followed the bank of the creek, but there was a place there where people could park. People from Siloam would come and park there and trying to get fish bait out of the creek. So if we discovered them, we'd be down there and help them, and sometimes they'd give us a nickel or a dime, and boy, we thought we was doing good. The cannon factory at that time was working up there, and they were dumping the slops from the cannon factory in the creek. And we were having a lot of boils, and Mom thought it was because of that, so she started trying to make us stay out of the creek. And of course, if we wasn't in the creek, we was into something else, and usually smoking grapevines or something. So she got to where when we come in for supper, she'd stand in the back door and tip her head back and see if her eyebrows were singed or her hair was wet. She was pretty hard to fool. Married shortly after got out of high school, worked at Plus Poultry, lived in Siloam, and then of course Dad and Mom were still down here on the farm. And they sold out in '63, moved to Gentry in order for Mom to have a little better house. And well, I moved back to Cincinnati in '63 in one of George Griffin's rent houses. And then eventually wound up across from the fire station there where Kenneth Geyer lives, there for a few years. And then in '67 moved to Weddington. Well, when we lived up in the holler, one of the neighbors was George Mackey, Joe Mackey's father. He was an old constable of the area when Dad was young, and before that he'd haul freight out from here into Texas and all. Had lots of stories to tell. And he and Mom, they had a lot of respect for each other. He had blueberry bushes, and Mom and Dad had cherry trees, so he'd pick blueberries and come and pick cherries so Mom could make pies. She mixed the cherries and blueberries and made pies, and of course George enjoyed the pies. And he would come and he got milk from Dad and Mom, and he'd come and stay till all hours of the night, keep Dad up to where he couldn't hardly get up to go to work and tell him his stories. But he'd set us boys on his lap and counter ribs and stuff like that. Dad asked me a few years before he passed away if I remembered George. I said, well, I remember him, and I think I remember what he looked like. I said, if he looked like Festus Hagen on the Gunsmoke show. He said, well, he did look a whole lot like him. And he, quite an old character, carried an old pistol and kept his breeches legs tied with binding twine at the top of his shoes, I guess to keep ticks and chiggers out, I don't know. But he was quite a character. And Dad and Mom had a cane patch with some neighbors named Adamson that lived over west when we lived up in the holler. And Dad and Adamson swapped work, and then of course George Mackey and Uncle Joe and different ones come and help cut that cane, and then I had Glenita's grandpa, Jim Randolph, come and was the cook and made molasses. And that's one of the few memories that I can recall of Grandpa coming down the hill carrying those empty syrup buckets down to the sardine mill. And after we moved down on the George Griffin place, well, Dad and Eb May swapped work, and Ralph Smith lived down below there on the creek road, and him and Dad swapped work, and Uncle Joe and Dad. And of course, when Uncle Joe and Dad were working together, Bill and I were over at the spring trying to see what we could get into. And after we moved up on the Passley place, we didn't, Dad had gone to carpenter, and then us boys worked for the neighbors in order to get our hay put up and stuff like that. Well, when we were in walking distance, we went to the Presbyterian church. But after we moved up to the Passley place, didn't have no way of going for a year or so, and then Tricia and Carol Ann come along, and Mom would have loved to went to church, but she really didn't have much of a chance for long. Of course, Carol Ann was sick, and Mom was pretty well housebound, so we didn't go much from there until after I got married. I worked at Plus Poultry for 6 years, hated every day of it, but there wasn't anything else in the country except pet milk. But somebody pretty near had to die for you to get on to pet milk, because they didn't leave that job. And there was a Bear Brand hosiery at that time. But then in time, Webb Wheel, Franklin Electric moved into the country. And I went to work at Webb Wheel in 1963, worked there till 1989, and got to where my legs wasn't working too good, so I left there and went to work for the school district in Gentry. Worked there for 12 years.
What was your first car?
An old 50 model Plymouth business coupe, the ugliest car you could make. The trunk was longer than the hood, and it wouldn't ever start as long as there's frost on the ground. But when the sun come up, my wife would drive it all day. I had to walk to work. Well, I don't know. Enjoy every day because they go by pretty fast. And, I think the kids are kind of handicapped now because they spend all their time with a computer or a video game or something. They need to get out, Of course, I guess that's old man wisdom, but getting out in the woods and such as that. We always had our pets, and we had lots of fun. We always had dogs, and at one time we had a pet coon that we'd caught, and for a while we had a pet crow named Jim that would speak to us when we come out of the morning. He'd holler, "Hi Jim, hi Jim." Such as that, and the outdoors is much better, I think, for young people than being cooped up inside all the time.
Jack Spears was my granddad, but my granddad bought and sold cattle and horses, and he raised horses and mules, and Marvin Moore also bought cattle and sold cattle and traded in cattle. And at that time, they didn't have area auction, area sale barns like do now. But about the only markets were Kansas City and Fort Smith, and I think Joplin had a market at that time. But anyway, you know, if they sold very many cattle, well, they shipped them by rail on the river. Granddad, or buy cattle, you know, and get a car load to ship. And sometimes, you know, he'd come up short, he might need 1 or 2 or 3 cows or something to fill the car up. You had to pay X amount when you shipped 1 cow or a whole car load. But anyway, him and Marvin would trade back and forth, you know. If Granddad liked a cow or 2, well, he'd contact Marvin. If Marvin had some, you know, that would go along with Granddad's, well, he'd just buy them from Marvin and go ahead and ship the car load, and Marvin would do the same way. But at this one time that Marvin was telling me this story, he said he had almost enough to fill a car, with the exception, you know, 2 or 3, 4 heads, something like that. So he came over to Granddad's, and Marvin had a truck. He could haul cattle then, and he told Granddad what he needed, and my Granddad told him, yeah. He said, I've got them, but he said they're on the mountain place up there, which was a mile or so east of my Granddad's place, and he said we'll have to drive them down here to the barn to load them, and he said, and there's not any of the boys here. He said, and I don't know if I can do it by myself. And Marvin said, he asked him, he said, well, he said, do you have a horse? I'll help you. And Granddad said, yeah, I've got an extra horse up there. He said, the boys have got all the others out, but he said, I've got one up there, but he said, Marvin, he said, you can't ride that horse. And of course, back then, you know, my Granddad, well, nearly all the old cowboys then, you know, their thought was there never was a horse that couldn't be rode, you know, or a cow that couldn't be caught. But Marvin said when Granddad told him he couldn't ride that horse, he said, it kind of hurt my feelings. And he said, my Granddad kind of realized what was going on. He said, now Marvin, he said, I don't mean that you can't ride a horse, but he said that old horse, he said, if you ever try to, if he runs, he said, you can't stop him. He said he gets the bits in his mouth. He said he comes to the barn. And Marvin said I was needing the cows pretty bad, so he said, I told him, well, he said, let's try it. He said, I'll try it. And so Marvin said they got up there on the mountain and said Granddad got the cows cut out and drove out in the road. They started up the road, and on one side of the road there wasn't any fence. And Marvin said just go along there pretty good, and one of the old cows in the bunch decided she'd go out in that open field. And Marvin said she was on my side of the road, so he said I just rode the horse across the road ditch and out in the field and got around her. And he said when the old horse realized what they were doing, you know, well, he took after the cow. He said that horse run the cow out in the road and said didn't run past the cow. And he said the horse didn't stop until we got to the barn. So he said I walked back down to the end of the lane from the barn down to the road to head the cows up the lane. He said Granddad come a-driving the cows down the road, and they turned and started up the lane to the barn. He said as Granddad rode by me, he said, Marvin, I thought you was going to help me. And Marvin said, I just looked up at him and told, well, said, I thought you was doing a pretty good job, so I just come on to open the gate down there.
Bob was talking about Marvin Moore a while ago. When he was a boy, they lived south of Prairie Grove. Uncle Melvin raised hogs, and they told about them driving hogs all the way from south of Prairie Grove to West Fork to the railroad. And that Marvin went ahead to, or Uncle Melvin went ahead of the hogs with a sack of corn. And they took those hogs all the way to West Fork. I just can't imagine they'd have to cross 2 or 3 streams. I don't know what all. I don't know how you'd move hogs that way.
Well, I don't either. You know, I've heard my Uncle Roy talk about driving hogs to Summers and to Westville, and what hogs I tried to drive, it was just almost impossible.
Yeah. But also, we was talking about horses. When I was a boy, we raised tomatoes for the cannery, and always had a horse to work. The first horse I remember that we got, a fellow named Johnson up on the mountain had her. Dad wanted something that was safe for us boys to work because he was a carpenter at the time. He bought an old mare off a guy named Johnson up on the mountain, and Carter Smith. Somebody hauled him up there and he rode the old mare back. But she was one-eyed and she had pones of warts in her ears. You couldn't put a bridle on over her ears, you had to buckle it on. And with that one eye, she was kind of crazy. We always check rode her tomatoes, and you could plow the tomatoes one way, but you had to quit. Go back the next day to plow the other way because she'd go sideways out through the patch. But then he got a hold of, she was getting real old, so he had Melvin Smith find us a horse. Got a little mare called Nellie. She was kind of a Morgan type mare and really good to ride, and of course she didn't neck rein, but and we worked her in the tomato patch and garden. We always had a big truck patch and garden, and 2.5 acres of tomatoes and about 4 acres of corn. But she was really a good one, and but we had neighbors that moved in north of us down there, an old man and a woman and a granddaughter. And he come one day and said somebody told him that they lived where Sweeters live now. Somebody told him that we had a good garden horse, and he wanted to borrow the horse. So of course, you know, neighbors are neighbors, so we loaned him our garden horse, and he didn't bring her back. We put that old chain harness on her, and here he went. He didn't bring her back. So after about a week, Dad said, well, boys, you loaned your horse out, you're going to have to go get her. So we had a big argument over which one of us was going to go, and finally wound up me and Juan both went. But the old man tried to pay us, and we said, no, we don't want no money. Well, you can, he had a pond where you could fish. It cost 50 cents to fish. But you can come and go fishing, and your granddaughter will take you fishing. We thought that's kind of funny. On the way home, Juan said, well, I may go fishing, but Betty ain't a-going. But we got the old mare home and plowed her potatoes and tomato patch, and he come back in a few days and wanted to borrow the old mare again. And of course, you know, we always loaned everything, but we were in the field, so he went to the house, and Mom told him no, said, we can't loan the mare, said she's galded in her breeching, and which the breeching on the harness is supposedly galled her. Well, we didn't have any harness with breeching on it, it was just chain harness. But anyway, that took care of that. He didn't come back. We thought that's kind of funny. Somebody told us what Mom said. But, we always had a good garden horse, and then we had a nice little saddle mare called Old Purdy. Dad wanted to sell her when he found out she'd foxtrot. He wanted to sell her because she'd bring a little money, but we talked him out of that somehow. He didn't want to keep nothing that wouldn't work or milk. We always had 8 or 10 or 12 milk cows.
Never had but one very bad wreck. And it wasn't the horse's fault. I was chasing an old cow one time. Didn't have saddle on the horse. Good thing, I guess, but the ground was froze, and this old cow didn't want to go in the barn lot to milk, you know. And my old horse was out there, and I just put a piece of binder twine around her neck and jumped on her, you know, and took after that cow. And she was getting into the game pretty good. She wasn't going to let the cow get away from her. The field had terraces in it, and she started up over one of them terraces, and the ground was froze hard, and her front feet slipped out from under, and she just stuck her nose in the ground, you know. And of course, I went out there about 50 foot on the frozen ground. I laid there a little while to see if I was still alive. And as I started to get up, well, you know, I looked around and she was standing right there beside me, checking on me. But that's the only bad accident I ever had with a horse. My cousin Don Gilbreth had just a small horse. And I guess we were 8 or 10 years old or so, but this little old horse, just all the kids that could get on her could ride her, you know, 1 or 10, or him, and but an adult couldn't ride the horse. She just wouldn't let a grown person ride her, or him. And my Uncle Roy we were over at Granny and Granddad's place, and my Uncle Roy was working over there, and he needed to go home for something, and he lived over on, well, old Dave Smith place up here, you know. And there was a lane that went back through the field and joined that place over there. But anyway, me and Don had old Sam there in the backyard. We'd been riding him, didn't have a saddle on, and it was pretty cold that day. But anyway, Roy come up there and he said, "Don, can I borrow your horse to go home and get whatever he needed?" And Don said, "No." He said, "You can't ride him." And of course, Roy, I don't guess, knew that an adult could ride Sam, or he thought he could, probably is the way it went. But then he said, you won't let me ride your horse?" And Don said, "Well," he said, "Roy, I don't care for you riding the horse, but," he said, "you can't ride him." And he said, "He'll throw you." And Roy was, you know, kind of the mindset that Granddad was. You know, there was a horse that you couldn't ride. But anyway, he said, "Well, I'm going to ride him." He said, "I'm going to try him." So he got on old Sam, and there's a pretty good hill right behind Granny and Granddad's house, and old Sam went over that hill and got in, and me and Don was standing there in the backyard watching, you know, see when it was going to happen. Sam got down this little hill, and oh, he unloaded him. He piled him up hard. Roy got up and he looked all around, see if anybody was watching. He got back on, he rode about another 100 foot, and Sam piled him again. And he still, you know, he wasn't going to give up, so he got back on Sam and got almost to the gate going up the lane, and Sam unloaded him again. Roy got up, tied the reins up on Sam's neck and took his hat off and whooped him. He knew Sam had come to the house. He went ahead and walked on home. Got back over there. Don said, "I thought you was going to ride Sam all the way to your house." You know, smart aleck kid. Roy said, "No," he said, "I decided it'd be easier to walk."
Bill Smith and I borrowed one of Delmer's horses one time, called Old Short Dog. He's kind of a short couple horse. And when you put the saddle on him, he'd get him a big breath of air, and then the first thing you know, the saddle would be loose. And we was just about 12 years old, so we probably didn't get it cinched down good anyway, but we borrowed Old Short Dog and rode him over to Henry Riley's. And they were baling a straw stack with an old stationary baler. Him and his wife and all three kids were up there. So Bill and I, we was going to make a grand entry, you know. He was riding in front. He whipped Old Short Dog up into a pretty good long lope, and we rode down, and just as he got where they was at, we turned him to the left, and we both landed on the ground and the saddle over on the side of the horse. We was telling Delmer about it later. When we landed, we was right in front of Henry. He was standing there with that pitchfork. We was telling Delmer about it, and Delmer said, "It's a wonder he hadn't stuck a fork in you." And when I was a big teenager, thought I was grown, well, I started smoking, and I got on that little pretty mare I mentioned a while ago, and started out, and the wind was blowing. I tried to light a cigarette and couldn't get it lit using old kitchen matches. So I got up here on the corner of Thresher Shed Hill, what we call it up here where Diane's boy lives. I stepped off and stepped up next to the stirrup and lit a match on that saddle and to light my cigarette, and she reached up and cow kicked me right there, just whack. I should have broke me from smoking, but it didn't. And after I was married, between my first wife and second wife, well, I had a nice little gray saddle horse, and he was just 2 or 3 years old. I had a brand new roping saddle, and I still think it was because of the saddle. He never did pitch with me except when I was using that saddle. Anyway, he unloaded me on. They were paving 244, or getting ready to over there. That's when I lived at Weddington. I got on that colt and rode him out through there, and he was doing fine, so I rode him up by the highway where the equipment was going, and it didn't bother him a bit. So I rode back behind the house back there about a half quarter, and there's a big pond there and a bank as tall as that wall. And I just turned him into that bank and turned his head loose, and I mean, when he hit the top of that bank, he had me on the ground before I knew what happened. And I was afraid to turn him loose. He dragged me back down off of the bank. And when I got back on him, I looked over there, and old Butler, Stanley Butler, was using a packer on that road. And when I got up on that horse and looked over that way, he was standing up on the fender of that tractor, looking over to see if I survived. One time I wasn't aiming to, Bill Smith and, no, it was Ronnie Riley and Burton Dale Griffin was going to try their horses, and I was sitting on that little old pretty mare and wasn't paying no attention, and I was watching them, and when they come by, she took off, and I wasn't expecting it, and it took me under a tree limb. That wasn't much fun. They always had a Halloween party. Glenita's mother, Juanita, and my second wife's mother, Miss Buckley, they always got a Halloween party together, and at other times, I guess Easter and one thing and another, they had stuff, but they always had a Halloween party and tried to give the kids something to do. But,
So what did you do at Halloween parties?
oh, they played all these play party games and all that. And I was so shy, I wouldn't hardly even speak to a girl, and Ms. Buckley would insist you wasn't going to set out, you was going to get in that game. And I was always so backward that I I couldn't enjoy it because I was embarrassed, afraid somebody'd notice me.
Well, when we lived up in the gym community, well, you know, they always, I guess, Christmas party was the biggest gathering they had. You know, everybody was there, and the kids would have a little program, you know, and they'd put it on, and Santa Claus would come. And I remember one party, Henry Jordan was going to be Santa Claus, and he went outside, you know, to put the Santa Claus suit on, and his little boy come around the corner of the building. I don't know what he was doing outside, you know. He was, Jimmy was about 5 or 6 years old, I guess. And he headed for the front of the schoolhouse, yelling, "I know who Santa Claus is, I know who Santa Claus is." And Henry took after him with a switch. You know? And I'm sure that made quite an impression on all the kids there, you know, Santa Claus chasing Jimmy a switch. Communities had gatherings, you know, now and then. But like Gary was talking, Juanita Randolph was just super with the kids. She always made sure, you know, that there was something going on that they could participate in and have fun.
Yeah.
One night I don't know, they were having some kind of party up at George Shoemaker's, and in the old house George had there, and the kids got to dancing, some kind of dancing game, you know, and this house had a partial basement under it. And of course, the room they were in was this basement. They got the dancing up there, and the whole house, the basement was about to cave in. George had to come in there and get and stop people from dancing. Had to go to another room, you know, to dance. But she helped a lot of kids around Cincinnati.
Yes, she did. We went, they had a Christmas tree at the Presbyterian Church. We were just 12, I was probably 12, something like that. In order for everybody to get a gift, for the parents, and, you know, we didn't go regular enough, I guess, to exchange names, so Mom had bought gifts for us to open up. And she bought us that's when they first come out with the ballpoint pens, I guess. It might have been fountain pens, I can't remember, but pretty big around. But you know how kids are. We went to fooling with them, and there was a cigarette lighter. He pulled the top off, there's a cigarette lighter in there that Mom didn't know about. So it wasn't long till she confiscated our Christmas gift. And they had talent contest at Cincinnati at the school for some kind of a fundraiser. I can't remember what, but they were really good, and everybody in the country would be there. Different ones played and sang, whatever. I know Jimmy Griscom played the fiddle, and I think Carter played the guitar, and for a backup for him. And Clifford Dale Randolph get up and sang, and Whistler Braden and his wife always entertained, but it was really good, good entertainment.
I don't know, it wasn't every Saturday night, but a lot of Saturday nights, well, the kids would gather at the store down here at Cincinnati, and somebody that had a truck, well, they'd pile in the back of that truck and go to Westville to the movies. And I don't know, I saw 10, 12, 15 people.
Oh, yeah.
in the back, that old yellow truck that Roy had, you
Yeah.
know, it'd hold a lot of kids.
Mustard yellow truck. Edna took kids about every weekend,
Mhm.
you know, when the weather was good, to Westville.
Sometimes when the weather wasn't good
Yeah.
too. You know. Well, Billy Dunn and Carter Smith, you know, the ones that kept people entertained. Cincinnati had a little pool hall for a while. Jimmy Cluck run it, and you know, that was kind of the gathering place. And during the summer, you know, if people had apples or peaches or whatever there was, you know, in season to eat, well, they'd bring to the pool hall, you know, and people to eat. And during the watermelon season, well, Jimmy Cluck had a big watermelon patch, and of course, I'm sure he brought watermelons quite often, but anyway, he had one big melon that he had marked for a seed melon, save the seeds, you know. People used to do that a lot. They'd save watermelon seed, but he had picked out this big old melon to save the seed from. Well, Billy Don and Carter went up there, and they waited till the melon got ripe, you know, so the seeds would be all right. But anyway, they slipped up there one evening and got Jimmy's seed watermelon and took it down to the pool hall. And of course, everybody, you know, oh, that's a big old melon. And they cut it, and you know, and it was a good melon. Jimmy Cluck, Jimmy was always happy, you know, laughing, ha ha ha. And he was talking about what a good melon what was, you know. I guess they had the melon about eat up, and Jim happened to walk by and he saw his mark on it there. You know, that was his seed melon. I guess things got kind of exciting there for a little while, you know, until everybody assured him that they were saving the seeds, you know, from this melon. But yeah, I guess Bill and Carter kept the community pretty lively. You know, they weren't mean, it wasn't mean tricks, but they were always doing something.
When Carter was a big old boy, he grown and beginning to carpenter a little bit. Dad had an old 29 Chevrolet Coupe, the first car that we had that I can remember, and sold it to Carter. And Carter remodeled it and put a bed on it, like, and painted it green with palm trees on it and one thing and another. But before he done the alterations on it, well, he was coming up to the house for something. And he was always the clown. Just before, of course, in old 29, you had your fuel and your spark, you know, and just before he got over the rise, we was outside cutting wood or splitting wood, and just before he got over the rise, he just set the spark and the gas and got out, and it was coming up the road probably 2 or 3 miles an hour, you know, and he was running along behind like he was trying to catch it. Head it off, Lloyd, head it off, it's a coming home.
So, who was the prettiest girl in the community?
Well,
Well, that can get you in trouble now.
yeah. I wound up married to the prettiest girl in the community, but
Yeah, I guess that's right.
that's my second go-round. But Donna Mae was awful pretty. They had some awful pretty girls in Cincinnati. I was so bashful I didn't speak to a girl till I was 17.
I'll let them ask me. Oh, I don't know. Usually, you know, dates consisted of kind of group meetings, you know. Oh, you know, after we got on up in high school, well, there was usually a popular cafe or someplace that everybody would get together.
Redwood Cafe there in
Mhm.
Lincoln was one of the places. I met Flossie Cheatham there, and I would give my eye teeth to go with her, but I didn't have a car, and she lived at Lincoln, so that ended that. But I carried a picture of her for a long time.
I'll tell her that.
Yeah.
I had to double date because I didn't have a car till I got married. Till-
Well, and that's the thing, you know, when we were kids and growing up, kids didn't go, you know, two people to the car, one person to the car, where they went, you know. If you went to a movie or anything very far off, you know, there may be 6 people in a car, and they'd all kind of pool their money to buy some gas, and you know, next time they'd take somebody else's car. But I've had 6 people in the cab of my pickup truck.
I went with a girl one night, there was 6 of us in the car, and time we got to the movie, my right leg had gone to sleep, and I didn't know it till I got out of the car. You talk about embarrassed, I couldn't even walk. It was just like that leg was dead.
Drunk again.
Bud Bunnell had an old flatbed wreck of a truck, and we'd all hang on it and go to Watts to the skating rink. There's an old gymnasium with a wooden floor, and the old floor's rough. And you better be rough, because they played pop the whip and everything else. And most of the boys was older than me. And you could get hurt, but it was lots of fun. You didn't ever complain. You just got up and went on.
So that was back before they had seatbelts then, right?
Oh, yeah.
Did y'all ever have any accidents out of that? Or anybody ever fall off, or?
Don't remember any, Christie. You know, of course, you know, if you got up to 15 miles an hour, you was going
Yeah.
pretty quick, you know. Like I say, there wasn't any paved roads.
Did y'all have any scary times when you were up on top of the hay bales or riding down the?
Yeah, a few times.
Me and Nick Randolph tore the telephone line down there in front of Miss Gardesser's one day, sitting on a load of hay. I was sitting with my face forward, and Nick was facing the back. And the telephone wire hit me right there in the forehead, and caught him on the back of the head, and jerked his hat off, and really hurt him. It didn't, you know, it hit me in the head. It ain't gonna hurt me any. But,
Bud Mormon and Fred Collins and me worked for Cecil Hawley and Frank Wright a few years. Every summer hauling hay, and there was 2 summers there. They had the land over at Lake Weddington. They called it the project, and they had it leased to cut hay on, and it was about 3 or 4 mile haul, you know, from the Weddington area over to Cecil's, and Frank's even one, but and 16 was paved in, but I guess Frank had a 2-ton truck that we were hauling hay on, and it's hot summertime, July and August, and first load we loaded over there that day. Well, Fred Collins, he climbed up on top of the load of hay to ride to the barn with. You know, it was pretty hot in the cab with 4 people, truck cab with 4 people in there. And Cecil, he said, I'm afraid you'll fall off of hay might fall, you know, and you'll fall off. No, Fred, I'll be okay, I'll be okay. Him and Cecil argued around with it for a little bit, you know, and Cecil just got in the truck and took off. And we got out there on 16 and come off of what is they call the Lake Weddington Road now. Got on 16 and goes up over a little hill and down and around the curve and we went up over the hill and about the middle of this curve there's a big old tree hanging out over the road and had a limb that ran all the way across the road. And we started down that hill and I said, Cecil, I said, we've got that hay stacked high and that limb's not too high down there. And he grinned. He gave the old truck some gas. But Bud Mormon said, Cecil said, you'll rake him off on that limb, you'll rake. And Cecil was kind of honored, you know.
Yeah.
He said, let's just see how tough he thinks he is. Just before we got to that tree, thump, 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 Fred rolled off the top of the hay and down on the cab. But it would have raked him off if he hadn't got off of the cab.
Me and little Jim Manship, Dennis Griffin hauled hay from the Illinois River bottom over here to where Gail Hamilton lives now. And Dennis's wife and stepdaughter, his wife was doing the driving and the stepdaughter went along. And Jim and I, we rode on top. But what was funny, that 40 acres, and we hauled several loads with an old 2-ton truck. But got down to, in the field, she'd do the driving, and then from there to the barn while he'd drive. But got down to one last bale in the field, and she managed to run over it somehow. Dennis jumped off of that old truck, throwed his old hat on the ground and stomped it and said, one blankety blank bale of hay and 40 acres and you run over it. I wanted a 54 Ford pickup. When they come out, I thought that was the prettiest thing that ever was. But I never did own one. My brother-in-law, Bill Buckley, well, he rodeoed at the time. He went over there to buy some kind of an old rig to get to the rodeos, and they just kept insisting he ought to buy a new one, and he kept telling them I can't afford it, but they kept insisting, so he finally just bought one. I guess his brother was with him. I guess he made a little down payment on it, and Bill never did make a payment on it. He drove it all over the country to the rodeos, had a little old screen wire deal on the back with a sheet iron on it to haul his saddle and stuff in. And some of the neighbor boys, one of the Brown boys, and Jimmy K. Wood, and some of them went with him. They went off up north and all around. But anyway, a year later, he wound up at Lincoln and entered the rodeo. And when the rodeo was over, of course, nobody took their keys out of the rig then. When the rodeo was over, his little doghouse and whatever was in the back of the truck was sitting on the ground, and they had confiscated his truck. It didn't bother him the least. The next day I was down at the store in Cincinnati sitting on the bench out front. And here he come through driving a 40 model Ford, and beating on the door, hooping, and out of the side he went.
Well, yeah, you always saw cars that you'd like to have, but I always thought the 55 and 56 Ford car was about the prettiest car I ever saw. Never did own one, but usually, whatever would run
Yeah.
was a good car.
around where it is, but it was a big old sycamore tree down there, oh, 300 or 400 yards west of where Jackson's branch come in.
Yeah.
Down there, everybody in the country swam there, and we hauled gravel out of there and stuff.
Yeah, I've saw 30 or 40 people there, I believe,
Yeah.
at times. you know.
And
Well,
Roy was pastoring it back then, but it didn't seem to bother Roy as long as you shut the gate, you know.
I should have told the story. I think I told you that Billy, Don, and Carter had come down and picked me up down here, you know, I was 4 or 5 years old, and ride back there to the creek to fish.
Oh, yeah.
But the creek then was deep enough. Of course, they both had small horses, but them horses could swim.
Oh, yeah.
They'd get them out in the creek, and the water was deep enough them horses
Yeah.
could swim in it.
Where's that big spring over there? That field, Pearson's,
Yeah,
down, you know, down there where they had that quarry.
yeah.
Where'd that spring go?
It runs into the Piper branch. The one at Phil's house, there's a big spring there.
Yeah.
In fact, it may be more than one. And then it flows north, and that joins it, and then it runs into the Piper branch down there the way I remember it.
I know one time, me and three, Sam and Sharon, and Jim and Carol, wasn't it?
So,
Went down there, Sam told us down there. And we heard a roar, boy, I mean it roared. Looked down there and there was a hole come out of that hill. It must have been, it was that
it
big
was
round.
huge, yeah.
It was just shooting out of there, it's like.
Is there?
Yeah, it was shooting from across the branch,
Well, I'll be,
It was really something.
yeah,
And the next time we went back,
just dribbling.
nothing there.
Yeah. I remember up here where you all used to live, over there on the east side belonged to Jackson's. There's a spring up there where Irvin Knox used to live. But it goes underground, and it'd been a big rain. We were working on that house that you all lived in to start with up there, D. Jackson house. Anyway, I took a notion to go down and see if I could find some mushrooms, because it'd come a big rain. And I got off down there, and there was water running out of the side of that hill on the south side, up this high, running out of there, big stream. The next time I went up there, it wasn't there. It was that spring up there, I guess, you know, it was so much rain that it,
Well,
Yeah.
Gary, have you ever saw this one down here at the fire station?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah.
Right out in front of the fire station there on the
Come out of the bank.
I didn't,
There's, you know, there's a limestone ledge
Yeah.
that comes around there. There's a hole in it about that big around. And after a big rain, or sometimes for several days, that thing, it'll run a stream of water
Wow.
that big out of there. And then it, you
Yeah.
know, it finally trickles out. But Sam talked about it and, you know, wonder where it comes from.
Yeah.
you know, across over in the end of that old mill pond, there's an old well house there.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, there was a spring there, and the well was up there across on the north side of the road from the store.
Mm-hmm.
Just an old dug well. And it didn't have that much water in it, just barely hid the jet on that pump. But it supplied the cannon factory and the store and the lodge hall and everything.
Is that right?
But then in long 63 or 4, dry and it sunk. And Clint Davis got him a witching stick and followed it down there and found that spring and dug down about 3 foot,
Yeah.
hit water and built that.
Is that
well
right?
Yeah.
What, you were talking about the Griffin place, the spring, going to the spring on it. Where is it at?
On the Griffin place.
Yeah. Where you live down here?
Oh, he was talking about the spring that's on the back side of Uncle Joe's.
Yeah.
Is that spring
Smith.
you're talking about?
Yeah, it runs right at the foot of that bluff and
Yeah.
joins the creek down there behind
Yeah.
what we called Old Bend. There was a big chalk bluff there, and it runs in right there where the creek hits that bluff.
Yeah.
Well, down here where Martin Christie had their trailer, drilled a well there. The old well was just a shallow well. And Christie used too much water. So they drilled another well there, and old Dick Wilson from over at Westville,
Yeah.
you know, he had one of them old cable drilled it, and he got down to 85 foot, and he was still in limestone, you know. I went up there one morning, and he said, I think I'm gonna quit drilling. And I said, how deep are you, Dick? He said, about 85 foot. And I said, well, I think Mark would like, and I would like for it, you know, drill on down a little deeper and get some reservoir built up. And he said, well, he said, I'm afraid if I drill through this limestone, I'm going to hit sulfur water. He said, nearly every well I've drilled around here, if I go through that limestone right in this area, he said it gets into that sulfur water. I said, well, we don't want it. I said, do you think that'll furnish enough water? And well, yeah, he said, and that's another reason I think I'll quit. He said, I've checked it twice. And he says, the best I can tell, that well's putting out 30 gallons a minute. And I said, how much? He said, 30 gallons a minute's the way I'm checking it. He said, I'm going to do it again here in a few minutes, just, you know, see if I'm figuring right. And but anyway, he waited a little while, and he checked it again. Yeah, he said, that thing's putting out 30 gallons a minute. Well, you can't even get a pump, little pump,
No.
10 or 12 gallons a minute, you know,
Yeah.
in the well. And he said that thing, he said it would water all the chicken houses you could build.
I know that well there's a house, and I've never seen less than 40 foot. I mean, you know,
It's 160 foot deep.
yeah, it's come up 40 foot,
Yeah.
and every time I've ever checked it's still around like 40 foot.
Yeah.
But we did pump it dry one summer, watering the calves, but it didn't take no time for it to
Built back up.
recover, you
Yeah.
know.
Well, when talking about drilling this well, Herman Reed lived up here where
Yeah.
you all lived, you know. Well, he come down to the house and he said, have you had that well, or you're going to drill up there, have you had it witched yet? And I said, no. And he said, well, he said, would you care if my dad come down and witched it? And I said, no, I don't care, Herman. And he said, well, his dad was getting up, I guess, close to 90 years old then. And he said, Dad's worried. He said he's afraid he's lost his touch. And Herman had drilled a well up here, you know, when he built them chicken houses. And he said he missed the water 3 foot. And he said it's about to wear him to death.
Oh.
He said all of his life he's been able to tell you just exactly, you
Yeah.
know, where you would hit the water. And I said, no, I don't care. And he said, well, I'll see if he wants to come down and witch it. So he went and talked to his dad, and oh yeah, he wanted to try it, you know, just to make sure. He got down here, that Herman brought him down there that morning, and I asked, I said, what do you need, Mr. Reed? And he said, well, he said, if I could find some forked willow branches, you know. He said, that's what I prefer, but he said, elm, he said, about anything will work, but he said, if you've got any willow, he said, I prefer that. So I run down the creek and I cut 4, 5, or 6, you know, and come back up there, and he worked all around the place, you know. And, but them sticks, he wore out 2 or 3 of them. They would bend over and just peel the bark off of them, you know, where he had a hold of them. But he come over there and sat down to me and Herman, and Herman said, "What do you think?" And he said, "Well," he said, "there's water everywhere up here." He said, "You can get water about anywhere," but he said, "that spot right over there," he said, "that's the best spot." And just about where we drilled the well, you know.
Yeah.
And Herman sat there a minute and he said, "Well, did you check to see how deep the water is when they'll hit water?" So he got his stick, you know, and he worked all the way around that one good spot and come back over there to it. He come over and sat down and Herman had already asked me, you know, I told him about the old well, and he said, "Where's the water coming in it?" And I said, 16 foot. We'd measured it, you know. And Mr. Reed come over and sat down, and he said, "Dad," he said, "how far is it to water?" And he said, "Well," he said, "the best I can tell," he said, "you're going to hit water at 16 foot. And Herman looked at me, and of course, you know, his dad didn't have any idea, you know, how
Yeah.
he didn't even know that old well was there.
Yeah.
But anyway, well, Herman, you know, that Herman had a big grin on his face. But anyway, when Dick started drilling the well, I told him, I said, "Now watch." I told him the story about Mr. Reed, you know. I said, "Watch real close and see, you know, when you hit the first water there." And I went on up to the house, and I was gone maybe an hour and went back up there. And Dick said, "You can call Mr. Reed and tell him that he hit it right on the money." He said, "It's just exactly 16 foot. So I went back to the house and I called Herman and told him to tell his dad, you know.
Well,
And
who
he
was
said-
Herman's dad?
Owen Reed.
But Herman said when they were kids, there was Herman and Tommy and who was the other one? May have just been two of the boys. But he said they dug wells, hand dug wells.
Oh, yeah.
And his dad was with him, and he said, "Boy," he said, "we couldn't hardly wait until we'd get down to where he'd tell us, you know, they was going to hit water." And he said they always
Well,
did. He said he didn't remember a time that they didn't hit water.
Where Brian lives, I had Greenberry, England, which that, and of course he knew the wells around there. Jake England's well was just 50, 60 foot deep, and one up at Floyd Collins and all.
Mhm.
But he come down there and found where two streams supposedly crossed, and kind of in the neighborhood where I wanted the well. I asked him, I said, "Well, is there going to be enough water for chicken houses?" And he said, "There'll be all the water you'll ever need at 50 feet.
Mhm.
And 48 foot they hit water. I had them go on down to 100 foot,
Mhm.
and when they pulled their equipment out, I come home from work that evening, and it was up within 6 foot of the top of the ground,
Yeah.
the top of the casing.
Well, I had always been kind of skeptical about people that witched, you
Yeah.
know, and until Mr. Reed got down there, and you know, I always thought maybe they could manipulate
Yeah.
them sticks, but watching him, you know, you'd watch that stick, and it did, you know, he'd have a pretty good grip on
Uh-huh.
it, and it would just peel the bark off of them,
It will.
them willow sticks.
It will. I've had to do it before.
Yeah.
I'm no well witcher, but
But they worked for him.
they work for me.
They worked for you.
Yeah.
He could witch, what was it you witched out there, the electric line or
Well, I use my rods on that.
no? Yeah.
I got a pair of brass copper rod, welding rods and copper one,
Yeah.
and cross them or hold them apart. Got the handles like that, and the handles are stuck down in where I can't touch them,
Yeah.
and then suckers will just
Yeah.
Yep.
which go across, you know, and then go back across and go up and go in. But I wished the well there at the house just playing. from the our well back, almost to the shop, and it'd peel the bark.
But Wong does some, too. He can witch for graves, can
Jerry Thompson does, I know.
Yeah, Jerry, he's well with you.
he? Yeah.
Well,
Jerry come up there and went through that Rock Spring Cemetery for me. There's 2 or 3 rows of sandstone, just every 5 or 6 foot. And I made some wooden crosses to put up if I could figure out where the graves was, but back then they used a headstone and a footstone. I didn't know whether they were headstone, the footstone,
Yeah.
and so on. But he went across it and, you know, and pretty well
Showed you
marked
where.
it out.
I've seen a guy, I don't know what that guy's name was, but he witched Carl Parker.
Yeah.
And he was up there and he witched it, and he had a string with something on it. They flipped it and they go around circles, and he counted that string every circle and told them that exactly where you're gonna get that water.
Changing the subject, but Donnie Jackson told me one time that up here where Jason Johnson bought that place there, where John Nader used to live, he said that Billy Bond and Homer Dodson bought that. They were brother-in-laws, you know, I think. Something like that. Anyway, they bought that together way back. Lawrence Broyles owned it, you know, when I was a kid. But way back there, they owned it. I guess it's probably in the Depression days because, the drought days, because he said that they bought a strip of land off of Donnie's grandpa over to that branch. And Donnie told us it was so many corn rows wide, I can't remember. I think he said corn rows were 42 inches apart, and this was so many corn rows wide. Described that on the deal, you know, over to that branch, so they'd have water for the cattle, I guess.
Well, it seems like when Johnny Adair bought that, I'm thinking that him and Donnie got together and they put that back into
Yeah, I
that
think.
place.
Yeah, I think that's what Donnie told me.
And, well, Johnny Adair drilled a well there, 1,300 and something foot deep, you know, when he had them hen houses.
Yeah.
Well, they guaranteed Johnny 100 gallons a minute if he'd let them go into that Ruby-Doo sand.
Yeah,
Brian had that witch there where Montana built, and it worked out. They hit water right where it said, but it was in a cave, and they just hit a lake of water, they said. So they pulled out, they had to pay for 100 foot,
Yeah.
but this was just like 55, 60 foot. So they pulled out. You got water there that you won't ever need anymore, but then it quit. That cave emptied or something. So he had to come back and set over it and go on down to 100 foot, and he got a good well. But when they first hit that, he said it was just like a lake of water, but it was in a cave like this. Disappeared. Dad told about them drilling down there at Chance when they moved down there. Grandpa moved down there in 1914, I believe it was. Uncle Cal Westville, the doctor over there, and he bought this place down there. So Grandpa and them moved down there. Anyway, they just an old dug well, and it wouldn't even supply the house. So they had to go clear down to Goat Springs to do the washing, you know, and all this. So he was going to have a well drilled. Run on to Jeff Morris there at the store. That was Juan's children's great-grandfather. Grandpa asked him, told him, Jeff said, I was going to have a well drilled there. He said, I was wondering if you could tell me how far they'll have to go to get water. And he said, he just looked at Grandpa and said, well, Lee, from where you live, it's 3 miles to water, it's 3 miles to Little Lee Springs, 3 miles from Tyler's Creek, and 3 miles to Goat Springs. But Dad said the guy come, came, you know, a well drilled and set up, and he stayed with them. They had to board him and his team. And Dad said he was there all summer at 120 foot, I believe he said. But he lost his bits a time or two. That ground down there, that shelf rock runs on the angle
Yeah.
and it'll pinch,
Go
it'll
it
lose
off.
your bits.
Well, you know, I don't know how water does it, but like this spring, well, down there where Christie lives, you know, Old Powell
Yeah.
Spring,
Yeah.
you know, it's not 20, it comes out almost the top of that
Yeah,
hill there.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
what's always been strange to me. You go up
Yeah,
on
me
that
too.
mountain up there,
Yeah.
and the
Jim,
water's right at the top of the ground.
At the highest point on that Jim Mountain,
Yeah.
or Beatty
Yeah.
Mountain they call it, but there, that old Marlette Spring, you know, it just bubbles up out of the ground right on top of the hill, and then right across the road there, where Kenneth Jordan lives,
Yeah.
well, there's another big spring there. One day down here, Nadine was talking about spring up there, but she kept saying it was up by the cabin that he built. And I
This
don't
might have been
remember.
a spring that he dug down something.
No, I remember when he dug that, well, he dug that hole there. But there's a spring north and east of it there, you know, where the road,
Yeah,
you know, where Joe James
Yeah.
used to, just right across, there's an old spring there. And then right south of Jim's house, there's a spring there where that Dexter Priest, well, there used to be a cannon factory there for a while. Do you remember the old cannon factory?
no, I've heard
Where
him
Miss
talk about it.
Johnson lived?
I've heard him talk about it,
Yeah,
but I never
but
was
just
there.
behind her house there, there's an old spring, and then the old Rock Meach house, just
Yeah,
north of it, you know,
Yeah.
back down in there, well, there's an old spring.
I noticed this spring down here was best as that.
Yeah.
yeah.
It don't run there like it used to.
But it was still running.
Yeah, we're still running.
Dad built that spring house there, and
Buster,
if I'm not mistaken, that old bathtub was in the spring house, but
Yeah.
I'm not certain of it.
but back in the, was it 80s that it got, no, it hadn't been that long ago, but the
Yeah.
springs around here
Yeah,
Yeah.
went dry just
Yeah.
a few years
yeah,
ago.
that was
Yeah.
2011. I
Yeah.
believe.
Yeah, too.
But see, that spring went dry.
Yeah.
It quit running, and Roy's spring up there quit running. And Buster's spring has come back some, but it's not near like it was,
Yeah.
you know.
I think they drilled a well because
Yeah.
Jerry Thompson went over and Witch did, if I remember.
The spring wouldn't furnish enough water for the house there, you know, so Robert just drilled a well back there.
That was 2006.
Was it 6? Because, oh, the spring down here, Martin Christie's well went dry, and Mark had a 500-gallon tank on the trailer, and then he had another 500-gallon tank over at the house that he
Yeah.
had the pump hooked to, you know. And he would set that trailer and tank down below the spring down here, and we just hooked on, I had a 1,000-gallon tank down there, stainless steel tank, and we just run a pipe from the overflow out of that tank down to the trailer, you
Yeah.
know. And when he first started filling it, it would, in 5 or 6 hours, it would fill that 500-gallon
Yeah.
tank up, you know. And then it just kept getting drier and drier, and the spring started slowing down a little bit. And it got to where it'd take all night, you know, to fill that tank up. And I think, the last time he filled it, were bringing the water line through, you know,
Oh, yeah.
about that time. But the last time Mark backed the trailer into there and filled it up, I think it took 2 days to fill that 500 gallon. The spring was still running, he's keeping the 1,000-gallon tank full.
Yeah.
The water line in there, and
Yeah.
we just hooked up to his house right quick, you know. But I was, you know, Buster's spring had already went dry, and Roy's had already went dry, and I was afraid this one was, you know, but it never did. But it's taken this, see, there's a little old stream or branch, you know, that runs all the way from this spring to the creek down there.
Yeah,
And I think just, this last year, the spring has finally picked up enough that the water's getting almost to the creek down there through it.
me and Brian was hunting one night. Tracy went with us, and Brian was carrying her on his shoulders and stumbled off in that.
And this thing,
Yeah.
oh, here.
That was before you all moved down here, though.
Several years ago, Jackie Johnson was baling hay for me. Well, it was after Bud got sick, and I couldn't keep up baling, you know, so I made a deal with Jack. I'd cut and rake it, and he'd bale it. But we back in the back of the field back there by the creek, and Jack was about to run out of twine on the baler, and he said, I gotta go to the house and call Diane, bring me some twine, you know. And I said, well, I'll just run over and get it. And, no. And well, I don't know, Shirley may have been down in the field or something. But anyway, called Diane to bring him some twine. Well, he was bailing the way back in the back, you know. And Diane had to come in the gate up there at the barn, you know. Well, you know, couldn't hardly tell that branch was through there. Yeah, but anyway, about the time she come in the gate, well, I went up there and I asked Jack, I said, did you tell Diane how, there were just 2 places you could cross it. Did you tell Diane how to get across the spring branch? So, no, he said, I didn't. Oh, she had him back there. Of course, you know, well, if Brian fell in, you know, mud's about.
Well, yeah.
Jack had an old dually Dodge with a camper on it. Diane, she made it through with the front end. She was going pretty good clip. But that thing just buried down to the axle.